those who are just joining, we're going to get started here in about 1 minute, just giving folks the opportunity to hop on. And so you know, this webinar is specifically for independent artists. So if you are a sole proprietor or if you're a freelancer, you're in the right place. If you are a nonprofit or another larger business organization entity, there's not going to be a ton of content in here for you, but if we get through the sole proprietor questions, we will be able to answer your questions at the end. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. First of all, everyone, hello, happy Friday. Here we are, we've made it. Jay has already asked, should I see my face? There was not indication that I should turn my camera on. So this is a webinar. So this is a Zoom webinar, which means you can see us, but we can't see you. I know, we're very presentational today. You can use the webinar chat to chat with other folks that are here on the webinar or to chat with us, the panelists. There's also a Q&A box that you'll see on your screen next to the chat. That's where you can put your questions that you want us to answer during the Q&A portion. I would recommend holding off on posting your questions yet, because we may answer them in the course of the presentation. But once you do put your questions in, what you'll see in that Q&A box is there's a little like button, upvote button. And if you see a question that you also have, you can upvote it, and that'll let us know that that's a priority question that more than one person on the webinar has. So a little kind of Zoom maintenance. So first off, a little about Arts Alliance Illinois. If you're not familiar with us, we are a statewide advocacy organization for the creative sector. We represent individual artists, nonprofits, for-profits, arts education, kind of the whole of the creative and cultural sector across Illinois. We're not the grant administrators for the B2B Arts Grant. The Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity is the grant administrator, and they have contracted us to be a community navigator for the creative arts sector. So that means that we're providing technical assistance for folks who are trying to apply for this grant. And we're doing outreach to try and make sure that everyone who is eligible for this finds out about it. But at the end of the day, we work for y'all. We work for the creative sector. We don't work for DCEO. Also, this $50 million exists because of advocates across the state that lobbied for this money during the last legislative session in 2022. This is why the advocacy that we do really matters. And if you're not already a member of our alliance, we would love to have you with us. Check out membership at artsalliance.org, get involved in our advocacy, because this is something that is a continuing work that we're doing to make sure that the creative and cultural sector here in Illinois has the support that it needs. I'm Casey. I'm the Director of Programs at Arts Alliance Illinois. I'll be doing the majority of the presentation here today. I am joined by two absolute rock stars, Kamari Kareem from Upscale Accounting Solutions, who will be providing some accounting support. Kamari, feel free to say hi.
Hello, everybody.
And the inimitable Chris Johnson from the Lawyers for the Creative Arts. Go ahead and say hi, Chris.
Hey, everybody. This is a really great opportunity sort of for our sector as a whole, and myself and LCA are excited to be able to provide some support.
We also have Sasha Ongtenko, who is our help desk manager. She's going to be here in the chat and kind of typing in the Q&A. She's saying hello. And our ASL interpreter, Kristen, who was with us on our first webinar for this and now is here for our last webinar, which I just really love the cyclical nature of these things. Very beautiful. All right, so a couple basic things about this grant. It is $50 million. The grant awards are between $5,000 and $250,000. There are 5 eligible categories: independent live venue operators, performing and presenting arts, arts education, museums, and cultural heritage organizations. There is a surprise sixth category that DCO has added to the application for movie theaters. We don't know why. They decided to give movie theaters their own category, but they did. But technically in the statute, there's 5 categories. For independent artists, for sole proprietors in particular, the 2 categories that you're looking at are the performing or presenting arts category and the arts education category. Those are the 2 categories that you could be eligible under. Within performing or presenting arts, that's our big daddy. That's like our big category, and it includes all of these different disciplines: dance, theater, film, literary arts, media arts, music, and visual arts. For teaching artists, if you're an individual teaching artist, you would be eligible under arts education, under the arts education bucket. You have to have experienced a decline in revenue or income of at least $5,000, and that's business income, right? Business revenue of at least $5,000 due to COVID in either 2020 or 2021. You don't have to have experienced a decline in both of those years, and you aren't able to add together declines from 2020 and 2021 in order to get you to that 5,000 threshold. It has to be in one of those years as compared to 2019. You have to have been in operation from March 12th, 2020 in Illinois, and you have to be in operation today. Another important point that we're going to come back to for some of these thornier questions, there will be an appeals process for this grant. So that means that if you have doubts right now, if there are things that maybe are wrong with your taxes, you have to file an amendment, something like that, put in an application, because that will get you in the system to be able to appeal if for some reason you're found ineligible, but in fact you should be eligible. On the first page of the application, I just want to point this out because I know that some folks have found this kind of confusing. You have to say what your industry is, and you, again, are either going to be in that performing or presenting arts or arts education. I know this has been particularly confusing for some visual arts sole proprietors who don't think of themselves as performing or presenting arts, but visual arts is included within that performing or presenting arts bucket. Also for literary arts, like there's some of this that's kind of the wording that DCO is using is a little misleading or confusing, but just so you know, these are the 2 categories that you may be eligible under as an individual creative. Another important thing, if you haven't already logged on to the application, it's a really, really simple application. So we are encouraging folks, if you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I only have 4 days left, I don't know if I'm going to have time. There are no narrative components. It's very short. It's very straightforward. If you have your tax returns from 2019, 2020, and 2021, you could finish this application in only 20 minutes. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. So we do encourage everyone who thinks that they may be eligible to put in an application, and also tell your friends, tell your network, tell your enemies, tell everyone that applications are due Wednesday, May 10th. And we want to make sure that everyone who may be eligible for this money gets in and gets an application in. Why is that important? Because this grant is not first come, first serve. Everyone who is eligible and applies will receive funding. And again, the minimum amount is $5,000. So this isn't a joke. This is money. This is real money. And there is currently not a plan for a second wave of funding. So if we don't get this $50 million out the door and into your pockets, we're leaving money on the table, and there's no guarantee that we'll be able to keep that money and have it go out to the creative sector. So this is a really, really important moment and a really important 5 days to make sure that everyone who may be eligible hears about this. So you've heard about it because you're here on this webinar, but I bet you have friends who haven't heard about it yet. I bet you have enemies who haven't heard about it yet. Let them know. Yeah. Rising tide, all boats, all that. Yeah. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Chris to talk a little bit about, I know there's also been some confusion around what the entity types are for individual artists. I'm going to hand it over to Chris to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Yeah, so as an individual creator or freelancer, depending on how you sort of, characterize yourself, if you call yourself an independent contractor, freelancer, individual creator, there are a number of different entity types that you may operate and that render you eligible for this program. So the first of those is what's known as a sole proprietorship. If you think of yourself as a freelancer or an independent contractor, you very well may be operating as a sole proprietorship. The thing to know about sole proprietorships is that you don't have to take any formal steps to form a sole proprietorship. The moment that you begin offering your services in commerce, you form a sole proprietorship. It is a legal entity, or it is not a legal entity, but it is a business where for which there is no distinction between the business and the owner. And so if you are providing costuming services for a theater production, if you are an actor that is contracted as a 1099 worker for a theatrical production, you're likely operating a sole proprietorship, provided that you make those services available to many different hiring parties and that sort of thing. There are two other types of entities that we'll talk about: limited liability companies and corporations. The nice thing about both of these is that if you operate as an LLC or as a corporation, you likely know that because you had to take affirmative steps in order to form those companies. Both limited liability companies and corporations require registration, though they call it different things. LLC, it's called organization. You file articles of organization with the Illinois Secretary of State's office. And then if we go to the next slide, Casey. And then corporations, same thing. You file articles of incorporation with the state of Illinois in order to form that. That said, with both LLCs and corporations, a single owner can run both an LLC and a corporation. And so an independent artist may be operating one of those businesses. The other thing to note about a corporation is there are sort of two ways that we refer to corporations. We refer to C Corps and S Corps. Technically, from the state of Illinois' perspective, these are the same type of entity, though you may have filed an S election with the IRS in order to change the way that that your company is taxed. The C corporation is the default designation. It's if you formed your entity with the state of Illinois and took no additional steps, you would have to pay corporate taxes. If you filed the S election, which is only available to companies with certain ownership structures, and there are a number of very specific requirements that you have to meet. But again, if you are an S corp, you know you're an S corp because you've taken all of these steps in order to meet that election. And these are all legal entity structures that independent artists may operate as, and that's why you may be here today. And each of those are eligible, assuming you meet the other requirements for this grant.
Great. So a little bit more about some of those requirements and how this grant's operating. So it's between $5,000 and $250,000 are the grant award amounts. It's going to be based on declines in revenues that you experienced between 2019 and 2020, or between 2019 and 2021, whichever is greater. And again, you are not able to add 2020 and 2021 together in order to reach that 5,000 threshold. If you launched businesses in early 2020 and don't have a comparison to 2019, you have to have been in operation prior to March 12th, 2020, but you will still be eligible for the minimum award amount of $5,000. If you launched your business in 2019, and let's say, for example, you launched it in November of 2019, so actually your income in 2019 was lower than 2020, but had you been in operation for the whole of 2019, it would have been higher and you would meet that $5,000 decline threshold. you will still be eligible. DCO is going to annualize, which is a word I learned through this process, your income, which is they're going to take whatever you made in November and December in this example, and they're going to apply it as if you'd been making that January through October to find out like what that full amount, if you'd been operating for all of 2019, would have been. So you may still be eligible even if you started late in 2019. Something that we're recommending, that DCO has recommended, though unfortunately it's not on the application, is that you can include a note. You can upload a note with your tax returns in the application and actually say, hey, this number is really low, my gross receipts are really low, my revenue is really low because I started on November 10th, 2019. And just take that opportunity to include a note in that upload in the application that explains what your situation is. I'm now going to pass it over to Kamari to talk a little bit about the specific forms for these for sole proprietors and that different individual entities might be looking at. And we're going to actually look at what the forms look like so you can see the specific line items that you should be using in order to fill out the application. Kamari, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yes, absolutely. So based upon your business structure will depend on the type of tax return that you will have to file since 2019, 2020, 2021. If you're filling out this application, you probably have been in business at least since 2019. So there should be some familiarity with the type of tax return that you are required to have filled out, but we'll go through the list. So if you are a sole proprietor or an LLC, you will have to file Form 1040, and then there will be Schedule C, profit and loss from business activities attached. That form is the form that will have all business activities, revenue, and expenses attached to it. And then if you're a C Corp, you will have the 1120, and then there are no schedules required for the 1120. And then if you are designated as an S Corporation, you will have the 1120S tax return that would need to be filed.
And to be clear on this, before we go to the next slide, you will have to upload your full tax return, even though DCO is only looking, for example, for the sole proprietors, they're only going to be looking at that Schedule C, but you still have to upload your full tax return.
Correct.
Another thing on the fiscal year, I don't know how much this applies to individuals. I'm going to bet not much, but just to say it, if your fiscal year is different from their calendar year, so if you have a fiscal year that ends in, let's say, that starts in June 30th, you're going to use the taxes from the year that ends in the year that they are wanting. So for example, you'll use your 2018 to 2019 taxes for 2019, you'll use your 2019 to 2020 taxes for 2020, and you'll use your 2020 to 2021 taxes for 2021. Correct. I have no idea if this really applies to anybody here, but that's the guidance if your fiscal year is different from your calendar year.
Correct. And then just kind of piggyback off earlier, based upon that specific form, there's a specific line item that also needs to be uploaded onto the application, specifically to show the revenue reduction year over year. So for the 1040 Schedule C, it's line 1. For the 1120, it's line 1A. And if you're designated as an S Corporation and you file 1120S, it is also line 1A. Okay, here is the Schedule C example for the 1040, and then line 1 is right here that's highlighted. So this is where your gross receipts and sales will be.
The other thing that they're going to be asking for on your application is your NAICS code, your NAICS code, or your business activity code. You can actually find that on your tax form. So it's here on line B, enter code from instructions. So if you look at your tax form, that code will be included. Know that I think this again applies more to some of the nonprofits and other business entities, but don't be worried if your NAICS code doesn't perfectly line up with what you actually do as an independent artist. The NAICS codes are infamously imperfect. and DCEO knows that. So they are not using that to determine eligibility, but what they are doing is using that to kind of bucket the applications, because y'all know we're just going to flood them with all sorts of applications for them to review, because we are going to get this money out to the creative sector, and they're going to use those NAICS codes to bucket those applications for their review on the back end. They are not using them not solely using NAICS codes to determine eligibility. So don't be freaked out by it. It's going to be okay. But that's where you find it on your tax form.
Okay, and then this is the 1120. So if you're designated as an C Corp, this would be the form, and then line 1A is highlighted right here.
For this one, the NAICS code is actually found further down on the tax form on page 4 in the Schedule K business, and it's called the Business Activity Code. Because y'all know they can't call this the same thing across entities, because that would be too easy, you know? Got to keep us on our toes.
Absolutely. All right, and then finally, as you're designated an S Corp, well, line 1A is right here highlighted. Same thing for gross receipts and sales.
And the Business Activity Code is line B there. Okay, so we're going to go through some FAQs, some questions that we've already been getting from folks, just to do a quick kind of rundown of some things. Unemployment benefits, will that show up in gross receipts or sales? No, unemployment income is not reported as gross receipts or sales on your Schedule C. That shows up in other places on your tax return. So it's not going to be taken into account. And I would say in general, know that as a sole proprietor, even though you're uploading your full tax return, they're only looking at that Schedule C for that eligible sole proprietorship. So even if you had to go get another job and have other income, W-2 income that came in during those years, that's not going to affect the loss that you can show on your Schedule C, assuming that your taxes are filed correctly. Are makeup artists and hairstylists eligible? It depends. You may be eligible under the performing or presenting arts category if a majority of your work is for one of the eligible disciplines. So if you're doing makeup or hair for theater or dance or film, even if you do some weddings on the side to feed yourself, that's okay, as long as a good significant chunk of your work is within the performing or presenting arts. You may be eligible. Tattoo artists are eligible also under the performing or presenting arts as visual artists. So if it's a tattoo, if you are, working as a tattoo artist, as a sole proprietor, individual artist, you may be eligible if you meet the other criteria. If you change your business or tax structure, and I see some questions already on this, you are still eligible. You need to apply as the entity that you are now. So for example, if you were a sole proprietor in 2019, 2020, and 2021 even, and then became an LLC or became a nonprofit or became, some other entity, in the application at the top, you would identify yourself as the entity type that you are currently. But then when you go to upload your tax documents, you would be still uploading the tax returns for those years. And you can always include a note that says, I operated as a sole proprietor from 2019 to 2021, even though I am currently operating as a nonprofit or whatever that explanation is. We had one interesting complex example that I want to use, which is a couple who are both sole proprietors who are eligible, who filed individually in 2019 and 2020, and then married and filed jointly in 2021. They are both still eligible. And what we are recommending is that they apply individually with 2 separate applications. They'll both upload their full tax return for 2021, which will be the same because they filed jointly. And we recommend just adding a note that says, this application is for Bob and my Schedule C is here. And this application is for Barbara and my Schedule C is here. In this case, it is a heterosexual couple named Bob and Barbara. I'm a member of a union and we're W-2 employees. Are we still eligible? W-2 employees are not eligible. So you will not be eligible for this grant, unfortunately. Can I apply to this grant if I have multiple businesses? Yes, as long as they're separate entities and they're all eligible, you can apply for as many separate entities as you own. So if you own different sole proprietors and LLCs, you can submit different applications, and you can do that all from the same submittable account, which is the account you have to make. in order to put through an application. I'm just short of demonstrating the required minimum decline in revenue of 5,000. Can I combine my decline? Nope, unfortunately not. It's got to be either in 2020 or 2021. DCO is not allowing you to combine your losses in order to reach that $5,000 threshold. I work as an administrator in an eligible nonprofit, but I'm paid as an independent contractor. Would I be eligible as a sole proprietor? So this is a slightly complex situation because technically you are a sole proprietor, but in this case, you may have been miscategorized. In other words, you should be an employee of that nonprofit, but potentially for financial or other reasons, that nonprofit is paying you as a contractor to avoid certain taxes or other requirements. And you will not be found eligible by DCO if that's the case. And you may raise some flags with the state about the fact that your nonprofit is miscategorizing their employees and contractors. So just a general heads up on that if that's your situation. If you still want to go ahead and try and put in an application, you can, since you are a sole proprietor and you do have those documents. But flagging that as a warning generally. All right, so our help desk, we're going to get to these questions that are here in the Q&A, but a couple points on what we have available here in the next 5 days. Our help desk is open, so if you don't get your question answered here, you can submit your question through our help desk and get one-on-one support. We are working really, really hard to make sure that our response time is very, very speedy between now and next Wednesday. It's all hands on deck over here. But obviously, getting your question in earlier is better. The other thing to know about that help desk is you can actually upload your documents. You can upload your tax returns, and that will allow us to see exactly what you're working with and get you, better responses and faster responses. All right, I'm going to take us over to the Q&A here. I know there's some questions that have shown up in the chat. If you can put your questions in the Q&A box instead, that would be really wonderful. If not, I'll try and get through the Q&A and then get over to any that we lost in the chat box. All right, so I see that Sasha has already been going in here and answering some of these questions. So you may see your question in the answered portion of the Q&A. I'll go through the open ones for right now. I'm still a little confused on if that can apply or not. I started my art business in 2017 and started making sales in 2018, but only registered as an LLC last year. I have done contracted artwork and sales since then. Would I still be able to apply? So it's going to depend on what your taxes look like. So if you have that 1040 Schedule C, if you were operating as a sole proprietor in 2019 and 2020, because it looks like you say you only just started your LLC last year, you may have been operating as a sole proprietor and then you would be eligible. Now, if you were working as a W-2 employee and you weren't claiming your any of the sales that you were doing during that time as like business income, then you would not be eligible. Kamaria or Chris, do you want to add any commentary on that?
The only other thing I'll add is, so if this isn't necessarily responsive to this particular question, but if you only registered as an LLC last year, we're only looking at 2019, 2020, and 2021 anyway. So you would have been a sole proprietorship throughout the relevant grant period. But if we were looking at a slightly different situation where you were operating as a sole proprietorship in 2019, but then you registered as an LLC in late 2020 or something along those lines, that is not a reason that you would be ineligible. You would still potentially be able to show that same loss based on your sole proprietorship revenue as compared to your LLC revenue. If you're operating the same business, it just had a different entity structure, you could still be eligible for this grant.
Yeah. I'll say, Lakita, I see you in the chat. I've not filed as a business yet. Do you have links to startup grants for artists? So even if you haven't, this may be a wording thing. Even if you haven't registered or filed paperwork, you may still have been operating as a sole proprietor if you've been doing art work and being paid for that artwork, even though you haven't filed anything with the Secretary of State or registered as an official business entity. That being said, you can always sign up to get our newsletter at artsalliance.org to get more information for grants for artists. And we always recommend checking out Illinois Arts Council Agency, or if you're in the city of Chicago, the Department of Commerce, I'm so used to saying it, DCASE, the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, which are two places for public funds for individual artists. Okay. I am SAG. Am I eligible? I just heard that if you are a union member, I'm not eligible. So that is only if you are operating as a W-2 employee, which many to most union folks are, because you are reaping the benefits of that union and get to be, get to have all the benefits that come with being a W-2 employee rather than an independent contractor. So if you are a W-2 employee, you are not eligible for this grant. Do they accept supplementary information to explain certain figures like IRS Form 1040 Schedule C line 1? This figure is high because I received pandemic recovery grants. Can I send details to show that if this was not included, then income would have declined? And if so, what would that look like? So the short answer is you can try. You can always upload a note with your application and explain the number. A longer answer would be that the reason for this grant is to make you whole for losses that you experienced due to COVID. And if you've already been made whole, if you've already received enough relief money that it actually fills what your loss was, then from DCO's perspective, this money isn't really meant for you. This is meant for folks who still have losses despite all of the different rounds of pandemic relief funding that have been available. So that's kind of the longer, more philosophical answer about whether or not you would be eligible. I have a second sole proprietorship where I do business coaching for creative women, photographers, artists, etc. Is that also eligible? So, Chris, do you want to get in here on that?
Sure, yeah. So it'll depend on how you filed your taxes. Is basically the long and the short of it. If you combined your income from two separate quote unquote arts businesses, let's say one is I don't know, one is music performance based and the second is music education based. If you combine the revenue from 1099 contracts on a single Schedule C, then you're going to be limited to a single application, likely. That said, if you follow quote unquote best practices with your tax filings and do a separate Schedule C using the NAICS code for music performance and a separate one using NAICS code for arts education, and then you have those the revenue from both of those businesses set out on multiple Schedule Cs, in that case, you likely can apply twice, one for each business.
Great.
So long as both Schedule Cs show the 5,000 loss.
I'm a performing artist, receive W-2s, and also a teaching artist and receive 1099s. Which category should I apply in? So here's something important to know about the categories is they don't really matter. They're not going to affect, they matter in terms of you need to fit one of them, but which one you fit in, it is not going to affect you know, what your grant award is. So I would say in this case, because your teaching artist revenue would be the revenue that they're looking at, because they're not going to look at your W-2 income. In this case, I would say that you would apply under arts education. And you would need to be able to show that you had a decline specifically in that 1099 income, assuming that that's, you know, showing up on a Schedule C on your tax return. Kamari, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think, yeah, I think that's, I think you covered that one.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, my net losses are significant, tens of thousands, due to the fact that I had to make substantial upgrades in order to work during the pandemic, but gross receipts don't show a $5,000 loss. Am I eligible? Kamari, do you have any thoughts on that? I see you shaking your nose.
Yeah, no, because it's based off of the line 1, the gross receipts. So if the gross receipts do not show the loss, then of the minimum 5,000, then more than likely you would not qualify. It's not looking at net profit, not looking at losses, but just the reduction in revenue.
Right. Again, if you want to try and apply, there will be an appeals process. You know, you can upload a note with your application explaining your situation, but to Kamari's point, as of right now, you will probably be found ineligible. Would we have had to have a business income loss? Oh, it disappeared. I think Sasha just answered that one. If someone was in college during much of 2019, so creative arts Schedule C income for that year was not as high as it would have been, would that be considered for eligibility? So this is a situation where I think you need to come to the help desk and give us a little bit more information about your situation, because the question is, were you already operating as a sole proprietor, or did you start operating as a sole proprietor later in the year in 2019 after you graduated? And that's going to be a distinction that matters for whether or not you're able to show that loss. So I would recommend coming to our help desk, submitting your question, giving a little bit more details about your situation, and also upload your tax returns to that help desk with that help ticket so that we can look at exactly what's going on. Can you remind us again what line they are going to be looking at on the tax forms? So I can just take us back. So this is for the S Corp, which I'm going to assume nobody on here is actually using, but I'll linger on it for a moment. 1A for gross receipts. This is for C Corp, 1A, business activity code on page 4. Similar, but I'll linger. And then our main man here, the Schedule C 1040. They're going to be looking at this line 1, gross receipts or sales, and then your NAICS code on line B. All right. Let's see. I was a full-time museum worker that was laid off at the start of the pandemic. This made me pick up independent contract jobs and made less in 2020 than what I was making in 2019. Do I qualify? Probably not, because I'm going to guess you were laid off after March 12th, 2020. If your museum was really prescient and decided to lay you off in February, and then you were already starting your independent, your sole proprietor work by March 12th, 2020, then you may qualify for the minimum award amount of $5,000. But if you started doing that work after March 12th, 2020, then unfortunately you will not be eligible for this grant. But you should have been eligible for unemployment. But yeah. As an individual artist, touring musician, would my loss be documented by the performing contracts I had prior to the pandemic? So DCO is only looking at your tax returns. So this is part of what makes this application quite simple. Though I realize for some of you, you wish that they were collecting more information so you could really show your loss. But they're not going to be, you do not have to submit any receipts. You do not have to submit any sort of, canceled contracts or anything like that. They're just going to be looking at the drop in revenue on your tax returns. If I just amended my 2021 taxes, should I upload my complete amended taxes? I see Kamari's typing an answer. I'm going to say the answer is yes. Yes, 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 definitely. And I will also say, I know we've been seeing from some folks that their taxes may have been filed improperly. So for example, one of the situations we saw was someone had a sole proprietorship and then they started driving for Instacart during the pandemic to make up some of their income from their creative work that dropped off. But that like Instacart money actually got put onto the same Schedule C for their sole proprietorship. So they weren't able to show loss, but it wasn't actually money related to their creative work. That's a situation where you would want to file an amendment. It is very, very close to the deadline at this point. We only have 5 days. But you could put in an application, try and file an amendment between now and the 10th, put in that application, or you can put in that application, clarify what's going on, and then hope that you end up in the appeals process and you can have your amended taxes for that appeals process and make a hopefully successful appeal to be able to be eligible. Where do they ask for the NAICS code in the application? That is the code from instructions on the Schedule C. Sasha, do you know what the actual question number is for that off the top of your head?
I can quickly source it and put it in the chat because I have the application open on my phone. It's an earlier question on the application. Give me 1 second. Of course, I need it.
And while you're
The
looking for
NAICS
that,
code's question
sorry.
is, sorry, NAICS code's questions are, it's question 8. There's it's 2 parts. So there's 2 drop-down boxes on when you get to that application. Question 8 will first ask for the category that your business falls under, the sector. Those are the first 2 numbers of the NAICS codes. And then once you select those 2 numbers, once you select the sector, it'll populate or inform another drop-down with other NAICS codes options that start with those first 2 numbers. And you would then go in and select the rest, find the rest of the full NAICS code number in 8A. So just know that this form is a dynamic application form, meaning the way that you answer certain questions will inform the following types of information that you can submit. So again, the NAICS codes are all loaded up in that application form. Most of us that apply will be under the prefix 7-1.
Yep, that's all the performing arts folks are under the 7-1. All right, so Tom, if we have been a sole proprietor doing video work since 2014, but started an LLC in 2020, what year should we put down when they ask what year did you start your business? And should we say we were in operation prior to March 12th, 2020 if I became an LLC after March 2020? So you should give the 2014 date as what date you started your business, assuming that sole proprietor that became an LLC, it's the same work, you just changed the business entity type. If you put later in 2020, you're going to get spit out as ineligible. So you want to put in the 2014 date, and then again, you can upload, an explanation with your tax forms that you were operating as a sole proprietor and then became an LLC. Yeah. What category do visual artists apply under? So you apply under performing or presenting arts. So I'll actually jump back here on this. So we can see this. Eligible categories. So everyone's going to be on this call. If you're an independent artist, you're going to be in the performing or presenting arts, which includes dance, theater, film, literary arts, media arts, music, and visual arts, or arts education if you're a teaching artist or working as a sole proprietor in education. Our NAICS codes are incorrect. In 2020, we planned to change it, but it was super complicated and not necessary for SVOG. Our NAICS code starts with 7.2. What should we do? You should not worry about it. So DCO is very aware that some folks, you know, that you may even have a different code from one year to the next if you have a different accountant, and that a lot of this, you know, generally the NAICS codes aren't used for much. So folks have not cared deeply about their accuracy. That being said, you can always, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but you can always upload a note with your tax returns and say, hey, this is the code on my tax return, but actually our business more aligns with this code, and that's the reason I'm putting that code in. We actually had DCO tell us specifically that if folks felt that their code on their tax returns was wrong, that they could pick a different code that they felt was more appropriate to explaining what their business activity was. But again, I would always just upload a note, better safe than sorry, with your tax documents to say, hey, you know, this is why. I will say, because you mentioned SVOG, if you are a venue operator, they're particularly aware of that with the independent venue operators, since a lot of them may use, you know, bar, tavern, you know, different NAICS codes that relate to the fact that they sell alcohol, but they're still a music venue. So that's a particular case that they're very aware of, that's going to be very common. So. Yeah. I have only ever filed my Schedule C as my legal name, but sometimes theaters issue documents to my professional name, which is different. Do I need to note this under doing business as, if it is all consistent in my filing? Kamari, do you have a perspective on this?
Give me just 1 second. Ooh, I missed it.
Oh, no problem. So it's so I think I'll do my part of answering this, and Chris, you can jump in. The doing business as is if you've actually filed like a doing business at, like that's like an official kind of form that you fill out. Isn't that right, Chris? Where you say like I'm doing business as X.
Yeah. If it'll depend on where you are in the state. Here in Cook County, that's filed with Cook County.
Yeah. So I would say, Marty, that you would just use your legal name. If you're worried that in your full tax return, are you saying that like your name shows up in a couple different ways within your tax return? I don't think that's going to flag anything or be an issue, but you can always upload a note and say, hey, FYI, in some of my 1099s, folks are, you know, using this name or that name, but this is my legal name and this is the name my sole proprietor is under. So even if my W-2 income had a drastic notable drop, but my Schedule C has an increase in revenue because I turned to art-based income to make up for my W-2 loss, I'm ineligible, right? Because they aren't taking into consideration W-2 income. That is correct. I do both teaching arts and I'm a visual artist selling work. Is performing arts still the category? Assuming that they're on the same Schedule C, yes, I would say go ahead and apply under the performing or presenting arts, because all of your work is under the visual arts category, even if some of it is teaching and some of it is, you know, selling artwork or doing exhibitions or that sort of work. Let's see if there are any more that we missed here. Do you see any other questions in the chat, Sasha, that we may have missed?
Did we answer the final one that I just saw come through? There's a few on.
Do
There's
we
one
need to
about
upload a work sample? Yes, great. So you do need to upload a work sample, but it's super chill. Don't worry about it. They're not going to be judging it on quality. So this is about proving that you are actually operating within the creative sector in Illinois. So do not worry about trying to find your, tippity top, bestest, best, most like soul rending, cutting edge work. It can be example of like flyers from shows you've had. It could be a YouTube video of a live performance, anything that is showing you kind of in action in your work. It could be, images from your studio. It could be images from an exhibit that you had. We would also just recommend there's a place for you to kind of describe what your work sample is, and the more details you can put in there, the better, because DCO is going to be using this as part of their review process to basically confirm, like, if your name is, Marcus Smith, but you're operating as DJ Jazzy Feet, they want to be able to find DJ Jazzy Feet's Instagram and know, okay, this is, that this person is actually operating as a DJ, and this is who they are. Websites are great. If you have a website, definitely put it in there. And I think there's an option for adding a website specifically. If you're a venue, I would also recommend, if you have a website, to put it in the website field, but to also potentially upload if you have any sort of like photos or video, or if you have some marketing materials or something like that from your venue. It's, doesn't hurt to also upload that. Sandra's asking for a link to the website, which I think Sasha has been dropping into the chat here. Let me see. You can always go to, let me scream forward in this. artsalliance.org/creative recovery. So this is where we have link outs to DCO's eligibility. We have link outs to the actual application. We have link outs to the help desk, and we'll have links to this recording of this webinar and past recordings that we've done for past webinars. There's a really great like deep dive accounting webinar that Jillian and Kamari did a couple weeks back. That was really lovely. So I see you're saying it doesn't seem to let us upload both a website and a sample. Sasha, am I wrong that there's a separate like website field that's separate from the work sample?
It is, so you either have the option that that person is correct for question 22, your work sample. You can only select a web link or upload a document. If you upload a document, you have up to 5 files that you can attach. So if you want to provide more than one sort of work example or work sample, I would select upload a document and then perhaps show a screenshot of your website or screenshot of the pages specifically you'd like DCEO to see that helps establish your eligibility. And then in addition, you could upload a flyer or something else, because you can have, again, up to 5 files you can attach.
Was there somewhere later though, and maybe this is for a different entity type, but I felt like there was a different field that was later in the application.
So then question 23, after you upload your sample, you have the opportunity to enter a brief description of your work sample. And in there, you would describe, this is what I've attached. It's a flyer of our dance performance in June. Here's the streaming site for my album. You there can also put your website link if you wanted to. I don't know that DCEO or the reviewer will choose to click on it. But you can absolutely use that opportunity to also include your website link in that field.
And I will say that it was DCO's intention to have a website field. So if they don't have a website field on the application, they are definitely interested in your website. So include it in that description.
I believe, just to jump in, now that you're saying it, there is question 31, which is part of the group of questions on the application that is requesting a bunch of demographic and identifying information, does allow you to enter a website.
Yeah.
Question 31.
Yeah, so it's separate from your work sample, but there is a separate field for putting your website in. Ooh, do you have a suggestion on who to go to for tax preparers for artists? Kamari, you just give them those recommendations. All right, we're at 3 p.m. here. Let's see, should performers and educators apply on 2 different applications? So if you have 2 different entities, then you can apply, you can have a separate application for each entity. But if you are doing both performance and education work and it is within the same sole proprietorship, that needs to be just one application. You can upload an audio file or and there's instructions on the application about what types of links they will accept, what types of file links they'll accept. Okay, so if we didn't answer your question to your satisfaction, or if you think of more questions, or if you immediately run and tell all of your friends and enemies about this grant application and then they have questions, you can always come to our help desk, artsalliance.org/creative recovery, or you can just go to artsalliance.org and you can navigate there from the homepage, B2B Arts. Again, this application closes on May 10th, which is this upcoming Wednesday. Please, please, please. Help us spread the word, help us let everybody you know who may be eligible that this money is available. Because if we don't get the money out, we might lose it. It's a use it or lose it situation. So thank you so much for coming, for asking your questions. Anything else, take it to the help desk. We are here for you. And again, if you are not familiar with Arts Alliance Illinois, we are a statewide advocacy organization, and we would love to keep you in our network and keep doing this good work of supporting you and supporting your work and making sure that Illinois is the place to be for creative artists in this country. Thank you so much, Kamari. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Sasha. And thank you so much to Kristen. We will see y'all soon, and get those applications in, y'all. Get those applications in. Thank you. Thank you.